Good afternoon and welcome to this first webinar in the Sills and Betteridge series for anyone going through separation or divorce. In this first session, we'll look at getting divorce ready, how you can best prepare for the journey through divorce. And presenting with me today is Ailsa Tennant, who's an associate solicitor at Sills and Betteridge, and she'll introduce herself in a moment. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. We must apologise for the fact that the tech failed a little bit earlier, so we're having to send this to you as a recording. But both Ailsa and I are absolutely ready and willing and able to take any questions from you via email once you've perhaps watched the webinar through. And we will make sure that our emails are included in the email that sends this recording out to you. We also had some questions in advance, which we have tried to incorporate into our presentation. So if you sent in a question beforehand, hopefully you'll find that it's answered in the session already. So Ailsa, do you want to very quickly introduce yourself? And then I'll introduce myself properly.
Hello, everybody. I am, like Claire said, an associate solicitor at Sills and Betteridge. I specialise in helping my clients through all aspects of divorce, finances, child arrangements, and I'll probably go into a bit more detail about myself a bit later on, but I will hand back to Claire now.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to share my screen. There we go. So just to introduce myself, my name's Claire Macklin. I'm a breakup and divorce coach. I've been doing that role for about 6 years now. I'm a master NLP practitioner and former lawyer. I've been divorced twice myself. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. And I'm a single mum to 2 teenage boys, and also the author of a book, Breakup from Crisis to Confidence, which you can get from my website or from Zen. So, as I said, I've been divorced myself twice. And through all of my work with clients, I concentrate on these 7 C's. And these are all the things that I've learned through my 2 divorces. First of all, I help you to concentrate on you, not your ex, but you. I help you to become calm, so I provide strategies to help you calm the anxious response that you may have, to get clarity around the things that perhaps frighten you, to focus on what you can and can't control, to see options and choices, because you're going to need to make choices throughout this journey that will affect your life going forward. I help my clients also to communicate more effectively and ultimately to create a vibrant and exciting future that you're excited about living. So, as I said, I've been divorced twice, and going through divorce can feel very much like your whole life has been derailed. My first divorce was when I was 35, and my children were very little. They were 3 and 1 at the time. And my husband told me over dinner in the middle of Holby City that he'd been seeing someone else and that for him, our marriage was over. I had had no idea. It was a bolt from the blue and completely left me reeling. And it was this experience that led me to set up my business 6 years ago, to support other people who were going through separation. My second divorce was different. This time it was my choice. I'd remarried in 2016, but by 2020 was increasingly unhappy, as were my children. So I made the very difficult decision to leave, and since then I've rebuilt my life over again. But whether it's something you choose, or whether it's something that is thrust upon you, or whether you agree mutually with your spouse that you're going to apply for a divorce, it's one of the most traumatic things that you can go through in life, second only to death of a loved one. It can be painful, it can be messy, it can be difficult, it can be emotionally very up and down and tiring and stressful. And it can mean loss. So there's a loss of identity, perhaps, there's a loss of friends, maybe the loss of your wider family, and perhaps the loss of your marital home. And it's, I believe, the only life event which potentially affects every area of your life. So what I want to do today is share some information with you and some strategies with you that will help you to start to cope better. And they're all strategies that I've used on myself, and I've also used with hundreds of clients since, so I know that they work. And I'm going to divide my talk into two sections. First of all, what to expect emotionally, and secondly, some practical strategies to help. So these are some of the emotions that I experienced when I went through both of my divorces. And they're the kind of things that my clients talk about in our sessions. And often my clients ask me if these feelings are normal. And I always say yes. These are totally normal things to feel when you're getting a divorce or you're going through a separation. So please don't feel alone if you're feeling any of these things. Every day can feel a bit like a roller coaster, especially in very early days, because there's a healing cycle to go through. And whether it's your choice or not, this healing process is something that you will go through. This is based on the work of a psychologist called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in the late 1960s, and she was working in the arena of grief and bereavement. It's now accepted that this curve applies to all kinds of transitions. So there are five main stages. The first is denial. This is when you're perhaps in shock. You can't quite believe this is happening. And your brain is protecting you from the pain. It numbs you by not allowing you to believe that this is happening. So if your separation has come as a shock, this stage can be really acute and overwhelming. And you might be thinking, you know, this isn't real. I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning and it'll all be over and this isn't happening to me. If the divorce is your choice, you've probably been through this stage already, maybe even for several years. And you might have been thinking, it's not that bad, I can manage, or it'll be okay, perhaps we can work it out, until you got to the point of saying out loud. The second stage is anger. And in this stage, you'll probably feel like you have a lot more energy. But anger often masks other emotions. So it could be fear, could be pain, perhaps it's hurt or betrayal. It could be directed at yourself, and it could also be directed at other people, particularly your ex-partner or the situation. It gives you energy, but it can also keep you stuck. And it can also lead you to do things you might later regret. The third stage is bargaining. And again, this is your brain trying to protect you from the pain by coming up with things that you perhaps could have done or could do differently. It helps postpone the sadness and the hurt and the helplessness. It's a way for your brain to try and take back control. So you might be thinking things like, if only I'd been a better partner, then he or she wouldn't have left. Or if only I could change this, then we might be able to go back. And if you made the decision, then this might be the point at which you start to doubt the decision that you've made. And sometimes one of you might make all kinds of promises to change in this phase to get the familiar of the relationship back. And the fourth stage is depression. This is when reality really sinks in and it can be really overwhelming. You know, you might not want to get out of bed in the morning. You might cry a lot and feel really low. And it's really important to look after yourself in this stage because you're likely to have a lot less energy. But it's also worth remembering that this is a normal part of going through a breakup and it doesn't mean that you'll feel depressed forever. And then the final stage is acceptance. And this doesn't mean that you're happy with what happened, but it does mean you can accept it, you can live with it, and you have hope and motivation to create a future that you're looking forward to. And this cycle can be different for everybody. It isn't a linear thing. You're not going to neatly follow all of these stages through. It will swirl. You might feel one thing one minute, something else the next minute. And I think it helps to realize that you're in this kind of process, that you're not alone. And it may also help you to look and identify which stage you feel you're in at any given time and notice how it fluctuates and changes over time. So another thing that I wanted to explain is kind of the response to stress that your brain goes through. So our brains are hotwired to spot threat and they're hotwired to react to secure our survival and self-preservation. So this is the emotional part of your brain responding to what's happening to you, and it wants to keep you safe. And it can overpower the rational, logical thinking part of your brain. And when it's triggered, and it might be triggered by all kinds of things when you're going through a divorce, perhaps your heart beats faster, your adrenaline rises, and you feel angry, you can't think straight, and you go red, perhaps you burst into tears. And your body will respond in one of four ways. So you go into fight, flight, freeze, or flop. And in a divorce, that might look like fighting might look like shouting or arguing. It's high conflict. The flight response might look like withdrawing or perhaps refusing to discuss things through or sulking. The freeze response might be you throw up your hands and ignore the problem, or you pretend it isn't happening. You hope it will go away perhaps on its own. And flop is more kind of giving up, giving in, perhaps trying to appease the other person. And handling your emotions is really, really fundamental to starting to handle those stress responses, and fundamental to navigating your way through divorce. And the way that you handle your emotions will massively impact your journey and how costly it is. And the more you can see things without the fog of emotion getting in the way, the more you'll be able to make really good, clear, informed decisions. So the first stage is to start identifying what it is that you're feeling. Now, your feelings are going to be yours. They're individual to you. They're different for everybody. And they can be really intense. They can be overwhelming and they can be contradictory. So I found, particularly my second divorce, I could feel sadness and relief all at the same time. Your emotions are your body's way of communicating with you. They're subconscious responses to what's happening. And I like to think they're a bit like visitors at the door. They knock at your door, and if you let them in, if you allow them in and you acknowledge them, they don't last as long. If, however, you fight them, you don't want to let them in, you squash them down, they knock louder, they knock louder, they knock louder, and eventually they burst through. And quite often that happens at a moment when you least want them to do. So I use this wheel with a lot of my clients to help them identify what it is they're feeling at any particular time. And you could start keeping perhaps a track of your feelings. And what I always say to people is your feelings are transitory, they pass, none of them hang around forever. And something you can do with those feelings is start to learn to surf them. So I like to use this with all of my clients to encourage you to imagine when you feel a feeling rising that you're on a surfboard. You're in the sea on your surfboard and you have a choice. You can either try and go over the wave or round the wave or under the wave, that emotion, but you're likely to get knocked off your board. The best thing to do is to turn your board and ride that wave to the shore. So if you can, go and sit somewhere comfortable and let that emotion kind of wash over you. Notice what it is and imagine that you're riding your surfboard to the shore. Remind yourself that surfboard always lands on the beach. You always land on the beach safely. The emotion will always rise and then fall again. And once you've landed on that beach, you can imagine yourself perhaps sitting in the sun, and with the sun on your shoulders, you can dry off, you can take a really deep breath, and you can think, what can I do next? So surfing those feelings is a really good way to start to ride the feelings and cope with them better. And then on a practical level, these are my sort of top tips at the start of your divorce journey. The first thing is to know who's who in your support network. So first of all, get the right professional support that you need. So you may need legal advice to get specific advice on your position and your options. You may also need financial advice, so to get clarity around what assets you have and specific advice on your situation. And you may need emotional support, so perhaps working with a coach like me or a therapist. And if you've got particular concerns, so for example, if you've been in a relationship where there's an element of abuse or perhaps coercive control, look for a coach or a therapist who has experience in that area and who can really give you specific expert support to help you through the particular challenges that you have. And then, of course, there's friends and family. So I would say the important thing is to make sure you spend time with what I call your radiators. Perhaps make a list of your radiators. These are the people who, when you spend time with them, you feel better. They lift you. They give you what you need. They listen to you. Perhaps they give you a hug or they make you tea. You know, I'm forever grateful to the friend who gave me breakfast every morning when I dropped my children off at nursery because it gave me something to eat. So spend time with those radiators and know who is good for giving you the things that you need, whether it's a hug or a call at 3 o'clock in the morning, or whether it's dinner or whether it's help with the children, whatever it may be. And there are some people to avoid. So avoid those people who you come away feeling drained. Perhaps whatever's happening to you, something worse has happened to them, or they have a very negative spin on everything and you come away feeling a lot worse. And avoid those people who I call the drama llamas. These are the people who they're interested in everything that's happening to you, but really only interested because it feeds something for them. They're interested in the drama, they get something from it. So really avoid those people. And also avoid the people who start sentences with "if I were you," because they aren't you, they're not in your situation. And they don't have to handle the consequences of anything that you do on their advice. And just another quick thing about friends and family, a couple of things to remember. First of all, your friends and family are likely to also have feelings and emotions about what's happening. So just be wary, they can fuel the fire. They can also help keep you stuck where you are in those feelings. So set boundaries with your friends and your family. You don't have to share everything with all of them. Share carefully and make sure that you share with people that you trust. And remember, you don't have to talk about it at all if you don't want to. Secondly, one of the best resources you have is your breath. Your breath is free, it's always with you, and it's a fantastic resource. And it's one of the best ways to soothe that fight, flight, freeze, flop response because it gets oxygen back to your brain and it helps you to bring your logical brain back on side. So, a strategy that I teach all of my clients is the 5-2-7 breathing. And we can do this now. So, if you breathe in for 5 and count to 5 in your head, and then hold for 2 and breathe out while you count to 7 in your head. And then again, in for 5, hold for 2 and out for 7. Hopefully you've already felt yourself calming. I can hear that my voice has become softer, my heart rate has gone down. And the really wonderful thing about that is not only does it get oxygen back to your brain, but the counting also interrupts your thoughts. So if you find yourself with lots and lots of thoughts swirling around your head at any one time, practice that breathing technique because the counting will interrupt the thoughts. You can't count and think all at the same time. And another little mantra that I found really, really helpful, and that lots of my clients do, is stop, breathe, think, respond. So whenever anything happens that you want to give an immediate emotional response to, just remind yourself to stop and breathe and think before you leap to any kind of response. And then know what you can and can't control. So this is really fundamental because you might find yourself wishing that your ex-partner would behave in a certain way. And you might be saying to yourself, why can't he or she just understand where I'm coming from? How can I get my ex-partner to stop doing that really irritating thing that they do? And you're falling into what I call the yellow zone of frustration here. You're trying to get somebody else to be different. The only things that we can control are in this blue circle here, the blue zone of power, we call that. So you can control your words, your actions, your behavior, and your reactions, your decisions, but you can't control somebody else's. And when you find yourself focusing on trying to get your ex to be different or understand you differently or say things differently or do things differently, your focus is shifted very much onto them. And you're likely to end up feeling frustrated or angry or helpless and resentful. So by focusing on your ex and what they're doing, you're giving your power away. So ask yourself, what's within my control here? And there are really simple things that are within your control that you could start to do as well. So for example, shopping in a different supermarket. If you always went shopping on a Saturday morning in Sainsbury's with your ex-partner and you find that that triggers memories for you, go shopping somewhere different on a different day, or get a new haircut, or wear clothes that make you feel really good. Perhaps change some things around at home, or change your routine for the start and end of each day. Start to take back control little by little over the decisions that you're making. Setting your intentions is also really, really important. So ask yourself how you want to be in your separation and your divorce. How do you want to show up? How do you want to behave? And fundamentally, where do you want your relationship with your ex-partner to be in 6 months or in a year or in 5 years? So my first divorce, it was really important to me that when my children were grown up, which they nearly are now, we could be in the same room We could perhaps go to weddings and communicate with each other. We could sit at the same table and it wouldn't be a problem for our children. And that kept me on the straight and narrow a lot of times during my first divorce, because I could ask myself, is what I'm about to say going to take me nearer or further away from that outcome? In my second divorce, my intention was different, because I don't have to have any contact anymore with my second ex-husband. So it didn't matter to me whether in the long term we could spend any time together. What actually mattered to me in my second separation was doing it with kindness and steadiness and steering my own ship through. So if you can get really clear on how you want to be in your separation and keep that vision in the forefront of your mind, it will help you to focus when you're about to say or do anything. And then remember to put the glass down. So it's so important to look after yourself when you're going through a separation or a divorce. And there's a little story that I want to tell you about a psychologist. So a psychologist is walking around a room and picks up a glass, and she's teaching stress management to the class. And everyone who sees her pick it up thinks, well, she's going to ask, is that glass half empty or half full? Actually, what she wants to know is, how heavy is this glass of water? And people called out all sorts of different answers. And the psychologist says, well, the absolute weight doesn't matter. It depends how long I hold it. So if I hold this glass for a minute, it's not a problem. If I hold it for an hour, I'm going to have an ache in my arm. And if I hold it for a day, my arm's going to be numb and feel paralyzed. And in each case, the weight of the glass doesn't change, but the longer I hold it, the heavier it becomes. And the stresses of going through a divorce are a bit like that glass of water. If you think about them for a while, nothing happens. If you think about them a lot longer, they begin to hurt. And if you think about them all day long, it may paralyze you and you maybe find it difficult to make any decisions. So put that glass down, look after yourself, be kind to you, find things that give you glimmers of joy in each day if you can. Eat well, eat little and often if you find eating difficult. Take a bit of exercise, spend time with people who lift you. Remember that you need to put your own oxygen mask on before you can help others. So look after yourself. It's massively important as you go through this process. And last of all, you don't have to see the whole staircase just yet. Take one step at a time. When you take small steps and break it down into chunks, it becomes easier to manage. And whenever you take a small step, that small step will add on to the step before and the step before and the step before. And before you know it, you will have taken great leaps forward. So perhaps ask yourself, what one step could I take today? Because you don't have to get to the end just yet. Take it one step at a time. And those are my top tips for getting divorce ready. I'm going to hand over to Ailsa now, who's going to talk us through some of the ways that you can get legally ready for your divorce.
Thank you, Claire. Let me just pull up my PowerPoint. Share it. There we are. Brilliant. So as Claire introduced, I am a solicitor at Sills and Betteridge in Lincoln. We have offices all over Lincolnshire, Nottinghamshire, Northamptonshire. The list is endless, but yeah, I work in the Lincoln office. So I'm an associate and I specialise in family law, divorce and finances and private children. I relocated back to Lincolnshire after completing my training at a firm in Cambridgeshire, and I've worked here at Sills for just under 4 years. I am a member of Resolution, which means that I'm committed to helping my clients resolve matters in a non-confrontational way. I assist both private paying and legal aid funded clients. So the first step is, in terms of when I would get involved in things, is when people approach me because they need to find a solicitor. It is always really difficult for many people because this is for most, a completely unknown situation. My goal is always to make the legal process as easy as possible, and ultimately to help people reach a resolution, whether that be in relation to their living arrangements, what will happen with their family home, maintenance, arrangements for their children. And for many, knowing where to even begin is really overwhelming. I do always try to encourage my clients to take one step at a time, as this can help make what often feels like a mountain slightly more manageable. And so the first step I think that is helpful is to speak out to a solicitor, and just find out what the position is and what they can do to help you. So when I first meet with my own clients, I take an hour to speak with them, hear what's happened, what has brought them to see me, listen to any concerns they have, and advise about what the process ahead looks like for them, and what options are available, because every case is different, everybody's life is different. And there isn't a one size fits all that we can use. So finding a solicitor, there are a number of options, and there is a list that goes far beyond what I will talk about today, but these are just some of the main ways that it's easiest to find a solicitor who is suited best for you. So the Law Society is a great place to start. There's a section on their website which allows you to search for solicitors in a certain area under different categories of law, and it gives you the details of lots of different firms and individuals in your area for you to have a look at. The resolution website that I talked about previously, and that's also a great place to find a solicitor. It's an organisation that lawyers can become a member of, so you have to fulfil certain criteria to be a member of resolution, to say that you are a member. We all have to subscribe to being committed to a code of practice that's set out by resolution, and we are to promote a constructive approach to family issues that consider the needs of the whole family and focus on being able to take a non-confrontational approach. The obvious answer is Google search. So you can Google solicitors in your area, and look at reviews. It's really important to look at the different websites, look at different individuals, because most websites will have a profile for each of their lawyers, and you'll be able to find out a little bit more about them, their experience, what their interests are at home, and see whether you like the look of them. Like with many relationships in life, your relationship with your solicitor is really important, and finding the right fit it is really key. Another thing is to speak with friends or family. You may have people who have been through a similar experience to yourself, and personal recommendations are really important, and particularly when those recommendations are made by people that you trust. The next thing that a lot of people will ask me when I first meet with them is what the costs are going to be, because understandably, many people are worried about instructing a solicitor. I'm under no illusions. Instructing a solicitor is expensive, and particularly with the cost of living crisis, finances are a lot tighter for a lot of people, which means that paying for a solicitor is harder. But also the need for a solicitor can be greater, because everyone's trying to make things stretch a bit further, and so there isn't always enough to go around to give everybody what they want, and so speaking to a solicitor to see what you're entitled to, what your need is really important. So if you're a private paying client, any work that is undertaken on your behalf is charged at an hourly rate. Just as an example, my hourly rate is £200 plus VAT per hour, but it completely depends upon the individual lawyer's experience as to what their rate will be, as it depends on seniority and other things like that. Most work is undertaken on a time spent basis, so you will just be charged for whatever work is done. Some solicitors will have fixed fee packages, but these typically only tend to relate to initial meetings and a divorce. But please bear in mind, when I say fixed fee for divorce, That does not mean everything. That is just the divorce process itself. Doesn't include the finances, doesn't include anything to do with any children. So bear that in mind. The way that we make it more manageable for clients is that at the end of each month you will receive a bill, so you're not getting 6 months worth of time all in one go, which can be really, really overwhelming. And if you are a client and you are struggling with invoices, with other things, the most important thing is that you tell us. So communicate with us, and be open and honest, because we don't know. So we will just continue working, even if things and then I never like to get to a point where I have to say to somebody I can't act for you anymore, because typically it's at a time where people really need us the most. Some people will be eligible for legal aid, and we do have a legal aid contract here at SILS that covers all areas of family law. If you would like to be assessed for legal aid, when you're speaking with us, you should inquire, and we can ask some questions, and determine whether we think that you may be eligible. And if we do, we can arrange for you to have a full assessment carried out. Legal aid is means and merits tested. So what that means is that on the merits aspect, the legal aid agency, they require evidence that you have been a victim of domestic abuse, and for example that can be by evidence from a letter from your GP, a domestic abuse charity or support group, or from a protective injunction. There is a very extensive list of evidence that is available. If it is something that if you are a victim of domestic abuse, please do contact us, and we can talk to you about that and see whether that is something we could help with. Legal aid is not just merits tested, it's means tested, so you must also be eligible both financially on both capital and income basis. If this is something that you would want to discuss, then we can speak to you about that and give you more information about what that financial criteria will be, because it isn't as there is no straight put in a box. It depends from case, and it varies from case to case. If you are interested in speaking to us, we offer a preliminary advice meeting at a reduced rate of £180 plus VAT for the first meeting, and that includes an hour's appointment, give or take however long we need. If we need a little bit longer, then in most cases, then it is up to the lawyer's discretion, but in most cases we can do a bit longer. You then get follow-up advice letters afterwards, which set everything out in writing. If you have that meeting with us and we think at that point you may be eligible for legal aid, then we will discuss that with you as well. So the divorce process. So the way it starts is that when you've made a decision that you're going to separate and obtain a divorce, the first legal step to be taken to end the marriage is to lodge an application for divorce. This can be done as a sole application or a joint application. The law did change in April 2022 and remove the need for one party to be at fault or for there to be a period of separation. Now it is sufficient for it simply to be confirmed to the court that the marriage has broken down irretrievably. The point of this was to remove some of the conflict associated with and that people experience when they are going through a separation, and hopefully make things slightly easier. It doesn't always, but to remove the need to blame somebody or the need to put things on hold for 2 years before you can do anything. So to apply for divorce, you will need your marriage certificate and the court fee of £593. Depending on your income, you may be eligible for a fee remission, meaning you may only need to pay part of the court fee, or you may not need to pay any of it at all. If you are doing a divorce yourself, then you can go onto the government website and fill in a help with fees application, and it's a straightforward form that takes you on the government website as to look into that. So once the divorce application has been approved by the court, you would have to wait 20 weeks before being able to apply for the next stage, which is called the conditional order. This used to be called decree nisi before they changed all the terminology we use in April last year. After that has been granted, you would have to wait a further 6 weeks and 1 day before being able to apply for your final order to finalise your divorce. This used to be called decree absolute. It is really important to remember, though, that until your conditional order has been granted, the financial order that we're going to talk about in a minute, which is really, really important, until you've got that conditional order, you can't file a financial order with the court. So it's important to start your divorce process as soon as you are able to do that, just so it doesn't delay matters in the future, because in some circumstances you can have a case where things everybody's reached an agreement but the divorce hasn't started, so then everything has to be put on hold for 6 months potentially. So that's something to bear in mind. So when I talk about financial orders, there are two routes to reaching the ultimate goal, which is a financial order, which has to be approved by the court in any circumstance. The first route is for an order to be made by agreement outside of court, and we refer to that as a consent order. The second is for an order to be made within court proceedings, and even if you are in proceedings, matters can settle in those proceedings by consent, but if an agreement cannot be reached, then a judge will impose an order on you at a final hearing. There are a number of ways in which an agreement can be reached, and the most common are negotiations between parties and between people themselves, negotiations through solicitors, or mediation. It does assist with negotiations if you both enter into what we call full and frank financial disclosure. This is where you would both collate all of your financial documentation. It includes property valuations, 12 months of bank statements, pay slips, pension valuations, effectively anything to do with your finances. It is what you would need for that. This then enables you to both make an informed decision about what is a fair division of the assets, and also would allow your solicitor or mediate your solicitor to advise you as to what would be fair, and also a mediator to assist you in negotiating in the process of mediation to hopefully reach a resolution. If an agreement cannot be reached, then sadly one person is going to need to issue an application to the court. As I've already talked about, an agreement can still be reached in proceedings, which would bring the proceedings to an end, but there is always a risk that a judge will have to make an order at a final hearing, and the risk is that it's not an order that either of you are happy with, and it's not your ideal your ideal situation. So that is a risk that people should always bear in mind. A common question is how long a divorce will take. I've already talked about how long the actual divorce process itself takes, but often it can take much longer when the finances are involved, because they need to be resolved as well. And much will depend upon at which point an agreement is reached, if an agreement is possible. For matters to be dealt with by consent, typically they take around 12 months, whereas cases in court can take 12 to 18 months, if not longer. But much will depend upon the individual circumstances of each case. And if you are in proceedings, you are at the hands of the court. Unfortunately, the courts are really overwhelmed at the moment with cases, and there are lots of delays we're experiencing, which can put pressure. It's an added stress that the people really don't need. It is important to remember that until the financial order has been approved by a court, however that is reached and however that's dealt with, each of your claims will remain open against each other. So whether it be 2 years, 5 years, 5 years later, without an order being there, either of you can come back and make a claim against the other in the future. And also, if there are children of the marriage, right at the beginning is when you should consider the arrangements for them. In future webinars, my colleagues will discuss those matters in more detail. And ultimately, every divorce is very different and very difficult. And a way of helping make it slightly easier is to be informed, know what the process is, know what may be coming up for you, and what can be done to help you. Myself and my colleagues are committed to assisting those in need, to reach the best outcome possible, not just for yourselves, but for your wider families. If I've when we had hoped that this would be a webinar, we had a question section, but what Claire and I both are hoping to be able to do for you is have when we send this recording to you, our emails will be contained within that email, so you can email us directly with any questions you have, and we can answer them as best we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ailsa. I think one of the big things that came across to me then is that when I was talking about sort of support net, getting your support network in place and so on, if you can gather together all the support that you need, and I think you can probably see from the very different presentations that we both gave, that there are very different supports that Ailsa and Sils provide to what I might be able to provide. And we can work really well together to make sure that you are supported from all the different angles. Because one of the things that I talk about a lot is I really believe divorce, when you're going through a divorce, it's a decision you make emotionally, but it has legal and financial consequences. And so I think if you can have support on an emotional level and a legal level and a financial level, then you're going to be giving yourself the best option to come out healthily the other side, and being able to get to that stage of acceptance that I talked about earlier. One question that I did have actually, which you might be able to answer, Ailsa, that I get asked all the time by my clients is, what do I need to take along to my first meeting with you as a lawyer when I come along to that? So perhaps that's something that you could talk about now very briefly, if that's okay.
You can bring absolutely nothing. Yourself is more than enough. But if you want to get the most out of the appointment, the best thing that you can bring is a bit of a breakdown about your financial circumstances, because not all lawyers deal with it in the same way. But when I first meet with people, I go through, I like to give so that I don't have to ask the same questions over and over, because I know how difficult that can be for people. I like to go through and talk about what your property's worth, what the value of any property you have is worth, what your mortgage balance is, how much roughly you earn a year, whether you're getting any benefits, what the balance is of your bank accounts. And many people, they don't know that. I don't know that about my own bank accounts. So it's helped. It can ease the pressure on you a bit and make the appointment as helpful as possible, and make sure that you get the most out of it. If you can bring that information with you, so you have a bit of an understanding, and so that I have an understanding of what your financial circumstances are, so I can give you more tailored advice. Also, some people find it really helpful to bring, if things have been particularly difficult and there is a long history of what's gone on. The first question I always ask people is, what's brought you here? Start wherever's comfortable. So making a bit of a list of as a sort of a shopping list for yourself, things you want to tell me that are really important to you. Lots of people want to talk about when they felt that things were becoming difficult, and whether there was a particular day or particular time when things came to a head. And so that can be really helpful. And on a practical level, what we do is we sort out all your ID and payment and everything before your meeting, but some lawyers don't. So bring your ID with you, and also bring your marriage certificate with you, because whether we're instructed to deal with your divorce or not, we still like to have a copy of it. So that's the more practical side of things.
Yeah,
But
that's really helpful. So I get asked that an awful lot, because and one of the other things that I do in my work often is, you were talking about all the different ways you can find a lawyer and choose a lawyer. So I'll quite often, if I'm working with a client before they start the process, I'll often help my clients think about what their priorities are, and choose a solicitor that perhaps is best suited for what they need. So if you're running a business with your ex-partner, and you've got some houses that you let out or something, then you need a different solicitor to if you're in a different situation to that, and perhaps your assets are much simpler, for
Yeah.
example. So
Yeah.
I think the message really from today's webinar is gather all the information you can, get the right support around you, and set your intention for how you want this to go and how you want to be in it. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that, Ailsa.
Yeah, and I just want people to be reassured that solicitors are not scary. We are there for you, and being open and honest. And we like to work with other people. If we're not precious about things, if you need the help from somebody like Claire, if there is, I mean, I have lots of people who have domestic abuse support workers who like to who are involved, and it helps me to know that I can help you in the best possible way, because I may not always be the best person to emotionally support you in a way that Claire can. And so it's important that we all work together, and we all have different strengths, and we all know what they are.
I think the overriding message is you don't have to go through this on your own. There is support out there, and we can tailor that support for you. So that feels like a good place to end. Our next session is on I think it's the 4th of October at 1 o'clock, and we'll be looking at sorting out the finances in that session. So all that remains is to say thank you very much for watching, and please do get in touch with either myself or Ailsa if you've got any questions that came up for you after you've watched the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.